Thank you. Let you start by thanking Halina for this invitation and for this lovely event so far, and for inviting me. I'm going to be speaking about dramaturgy and interaction, and which used to be something very not obvious. I will come back to that, but first I'm going to start with the topic of the session, which is the 31% of what people expect in exhibitions, apparently, the experience, and some different perspectives on how to design it. This is a designed experience. This is a city plan of a city in America. I think it's Houston, Texas, but it doesn't really matter. It's a lot of cities look like this that's been designed for certain purposes, but one of them is not walking around in the city and enjoying oneself. This is designed very rationally to have a steady flow of cars being able to drive in and out of the city, to have readable layouts, and even it's designed so that the numbers of the streets should be legible in a sort of mental model, so you understand how they relate to each other. They go from up and down, and it's a very rational and numeric experience as such. But in terms of an aesthetical experience, it's not that much to enjoy, I think. The monotony of such a design makes the experience not very exciting and not very tantalizing, and not necessarily something you want to do over and over again. This, however, is another design that's a completely different experience. It's still a city, it's still been designed, but it hasn't really been designed top-down. It's very bottom-up. This is the city of Venice. It's been designed over millennia, I presume. But it's an experience to go there. And the reason people like it is because it's not designed to be rational and to be practical and to be something that you understand immediately. The not understanding is the interesting part. The getting lost is the interesting part. People go there to be able to get lost. I mean, that's really strange. That doesn't make any sense, but that's actually what they do. And in this sort of unclarity of the space, there has been design on top of these layers, these different layers that have grown kind of organically over time. Other people have designed things. I started noticing when I was in Venice that there's two main things that the signage points to. It points to either the train station or to San Marco Square or to the Rialto Bridge. And they're kind of in the east and in the west of the city, and wherever you are, you can always see a sign that points there. But it doesn't really point there. It points kind of to a way to get there. So eventually, if you follow the signage, you will get there. But on the way to getting there, you will pass by some lovely cafes, some lovely boutiques, or some lovely bars. And the point is, if you all are already in a lovely boutique of some sort where you can buy handmade glass, and you go outside and you see the sign, you follow it, you will stumble upon another lovely boutique that makes some lovely soap or something. And the same thing goes for the bar. If you're in a bar, you go outside, you see, oh, okay, where am I going? Oh, okay, Rialto, I'm going there. There's another bar and another bar. Because you're in the bar street. But they don't really have, you know, the stradas. They have a really complicated net of streets. So I thought, okay, this is obviously some brilliant strategy from the Italian tourist board here. There's some evil genius work at hand. So I presented this to this theory to some Italian friends of mine, but they protested immediately and said, no way, there's no way there's a mastermind behind this. Here's what happened. The Italian government put the signs up, and they lead nowhere that makes any kind of sense. So people just started flowing through the city in the random way of the Italian signage, because that can be like you can leave Milan towards Torino, and it says 100 kilometers, turn left, and then you turn left and it says 110 kilometers, and it doesn't make any sense, and that's how it works. We won't get into the background of why it works like that, but that's how it works. But the reason, the true real reason that this works like this, they think, is because the signs were there, and then the entrepreneurs adapted. So over time, they saw people are walking in these kind of, following these kind of flows, and they are coming from these kind of experiences and tend to want more of these experiences, so we will give it to them. So it's a very intricate, organic growth of how this experience of Venice, which is an amazing one, has actually been designed bottom up at the fingertips of where the people who are servicing the actual people actually are. Does anybody know what this experience is? This is a layout of a famous Swedish furniture selling store that will remain nameless. This experience is also designed. It's designed in a very meticulous way, and it's been studied very meticulously, as you see. And it's been designed in a way so that when you do walk around, there's only basically one way to walk around. You get maximum exposure to all the things that you could buy, not necessarily the things you want to buy. And it's also designed in a way so it's not really legible. Like when you go, it's like a casino in America, you know, there's no clocks, and if there are clocks, there's just many of them, and none of them are the same. There's no exits, and there's no real understanding of what's north and south or up or down, kind of like Venice, but when you look up, you don't see a lovely soap boutique, you see a lovely cactus that you want to immediately buy. You get lost, you become a little bit vulnerable, and there's some top-notch bed sheets that you could enjoy. And this actually functions like a very well-designed city, it turns out. And it's been designed to have the experience being that you become a little bit unsure of where you are, and as you become unsure, you start looking for signs to know where you are, and as you look, you see something else, because then you're in like search mode, and when you're searching, you know, cacti. And this is the Tate in London, in the UK, which has been designed in a slightly different way, but it's still, you know, designed in space, but they don't really want to force people. As in an exhibition, we kind of want to not force people to take a certain path, but we want to still have a path. And this kind of representation also becomes something close to psychogeography. This is research coming from the after-war era, when people started investigating how people feel in different parts of the city. Do they feel safe? Do they feel scared? Do they feel happy? Which is experience. And if you use that knowledge to then design something, then you have experience design, obviously. So to the other part of what I do is I'm an interaction designer at Gagarin in Iceland. And as an interaction designer, you come to school one day and you open a book and you see this is what the teacher shows you. And this is the approach of interaction design. This is how the input of computers into humans. What do the computers have to work with when dealing with humans? Well, they have a finger, they have an eye, and they have 2 ears, and that's what they have to deal with humans. And that's a bit difficult to work with in terms of experience, of course. And most of the research that has been done on computers has mostly been on multitasking office workers, and to optimize for multitasking office workers to be able to send emails and answer phone calls quickly. But in terms of designing an experience for the exhibition space, I think we have to use a completely different model for interaction design as well. And I'm going to use a case study here that is the Norwegian Seabird Center, which was a project we got at Gagarin to design an exhibition based on an interpretive plan that said that we should talk about the seabirds of Norway, the threat to seabirds of Norway, and the environmental issues that is posing that threat. And since this was an exhibition where we got to basically make the entire story of how we told that information and provocation, we had to outline it somehow and make it a narrative and make it a thread through the museum and allow people to follow that thread. We didn't force them to follow it, but as long as you have a kind of a narrative, these days, even if that narrative is broken up, it's still a mental model in people's heads that they can go back to and understand that it has a beginning, it has an end, and it has kind of a change. And here's how that narrative looks. Spread out over 12 installations. But to explain to you that there is narrative and drama in interaction design, I'm going to use an example of a very basic interactive experience that only uses fingers and eyes. And this is in Norwegian, but it's still understandable. There's only two parameters. There's tension or excitement on the y-axis, and there's time on the x-axis. And what this is an ATM withdrawal. And you wouldn't think that there's any kind of excitement in getting money from a cash machine, but actually there is. And depending on how you design that cash machine, the experience is completely different. And all of this difference is made by when you get to know whether or not you have the money you want to take out. And if you see this white line here, that is the representation of when you get to know whether or not you have the money you can take out. And this is the normal design of an ATM machine. And then the lilac line is the redesign of the ATM machine. So to just tell you how the normal one works is, you go to the ATM machine, you put in your card. I mean, these days, usually the only time you use ATM machines are abroad, so it's like extra tension right there. You're putting your card into a machine abroad. You don't know if it's going to switch to English or not, or if it's still in, Italian or Malagasy. And having done that, you've given up exposed yourself to a lot of vulnerability. I mean, this is like basically your food and shelter for the next few days, and that's 2 out of the 3 top Maslow needs, isn't it? So you put in your card, you're asked to punch in your PIN number. Maybe you don't remember your PIN number. Tension rises even more. And then after the slight relief of having gotten the right PIN number, you're asked to take out an amount of money. And now the real tension begins, because now you don't know, maybe even if you're abroad, you don't know the currency. And even if you do know that, you have to take out an amount of money that you know you have. And then you have to start thinking, okay, how much money do I need? Do I really need that much? And how much is that in this currency? And have I maybe spent that much money already because I used the card earlier? And you're not really sure, showing all these numbers. And then finally, at the top of the excitement, you punch in the number that you want to take out, and then the machine calls its friend, which for some reason takes a long time in 2013 still. It calls its friend, and then the friend calls back, and then finally, you get your money out, and the tension drops. And this is actually an interesting structure, because it slightly resembles something else that I will come back to later. And that's obviously quite bad for ATM machines. So if you were to redesign the ATM machine, you would have the information on whether or not you have that amount of money immediately after you punched in the code. And then you would get the purple line. Then you would punch in the code, and you would get like the numbers that you can take out highlighted, and the ones you can't be just transparent or something. So you know that, okay, this amount of money I can take out. For experience purposes, I don't know if that causes some kind of problems with banking, but for the experience, that would immediately drop the tension down to a normal level, and the transaction would be much less of a hassle. But going back to the badly designed ATM machine, because of the drama it implies, it's actually a good design for other things. Namely, it strictly resembles the classic structure of a Greek tragedy or drama or a Clint Eastwood movie. It starts with Clint Eastwood riding into town. There's some trouble, He tries to overcome that trouble, but can't really do it alone. He has to leave town, make friends with 6 other samurais. Re-enter, there's a lot of close-ups on the eyes and shoot out, and then finally they win and everybody rides out in the sunset. And this is kind of how we designed the Seabird Center in Norway. We started with the riding into town, establishing who's the hero. Of course, you're not sure, but you see Clint Eastwood after a while. He always does something really good in the beginning, so you're really sure he's the good guy. And we did the same in this exhibition. We allowed you to identify with the hero. We contextualized the story of the seabird over time. We pose some sort of threat that you don't really know what it is, but it is something that's overhanging you in this exhibition. And then we went to the climatic drama of the story over another sequence of contextualizing letting you go back in time yourself, and then finally everybody rides out in the end in the sunset. And this first experience of identification was to create what's called interpassivity. It's like you acting through an avatar. And that's a very basic thing for when it comes to movies and things, but it's not really been an interactivity element. But what we did was we let people become birds, kind of. So there was a motion tracking based installation where you step up and you're asked to spread your wings to fly. And depending on where you stand, you get a differently sized bird flying towards you. So if you step all the way back, you get a small turn, and if you go all the way front, you get a mighty eagle flying your way. And as such, you have kind of identified with the hero of this story. The hero of this story, in this case, being the bird. Further, we had an installation that was supposed to reflect the poetic nature of, well, in this case, nature. It was an installation that went from the morning of this island of where the seabirds live all the way to the nighttime. And through that, you got to see only the light of what usually takes place in this island, but you heard the sounds of the birds to sort of establish what is it that is at stake here. Well, it's this beautiful nature, but what is this beautiful nature? So we took some of it and removed some of it to make you hear that, okay, in the morning they wake up, in the lunchtime they go hunting, and in the evening they're serenading each other. And all this time while you're walking through the exhibition, there's something looming overhead. There's something hanging above you, and in this case you're not really sure what it is, but underneath there's an explanation on a piece of wood that says that this is the representation of the amount of Google hits you get for global warming is true and global warming is false. And as you see, it's kind of close. And if you're standing there looking up at it, it's like almost a visceral experience. And you also realize that there's something that need be doing. Then we let people themselves pose the threat to nature, so that you kind of use this reverse catharsis thing where you let people do something that turns out to be bad for nature. And then they have already caused it, and then they realize the consequences. In this case, it was, we used a light-dark metaphor where you're projecting light on something, but if you spill oil or something, it becomes dark. And then we try to time contextualize it. In this case, we use the geological time aspect, going back all the way 400 million years, which is the time this island has been around, and also, coincidentally, almost the time that birds have been around. They've been around since the dinosaurs, whereas man has only been around for 200,000 years. And in that context, the planet has changed so much. It's changed a lot. It's gone through a lot of geological changes. Norway at this time was down by the southern Arctic parts of the world. And it's gone through ice ages. It's gone through times when it was so warm that there was crocodiles in the Mediterranean, and this will obviously continue. The problem is it will be faster, and nature as such won't be recognizable to us. And that was the point of this exhibition, that nature will continue, but not nature as we see it. And what's influencing nature is how we see it. Because if we see that nature should be conserved, then we will do something about it. But if we don't really, then we won't. And to globalize this issue, we use the metaphor of birds themselves, because this is a Norwegian seabird center. It sounds very minuscule in its reach, in a way. But it turns out that these creatures are quite global themselves. So we use them as that metaphor. We stretched their flight patterns out on a scale, like you have in the end of a magazine, in the in-flight magazine. You see where the airline flies back and forth. And we did exactly that. We took where they come from and where they go and put it on kind of a map. And as you see, they fly from Norway to England. They fly from Norway to Spain. They fly from Norway to Africa. And all the time, you realize when you're exiting the exhibition, that once the planet gets heated up, the bird that flies all the way to Antarctica, flies from Norway, will not have anywhere else to go. It's going to end up not having somewhere to move if the planet heats up. Because north of Norway, there's nothing. There's the Arctic, but that's just ice. But after that, there's nothing. And that's the message we're sort of trying to get people to act upon. And what we used in this exhibition to get these ideas across was very much to get people involved, to get people to act, to get people to move physical objects. Because if you get people to use their bodies and the physical objects around them, they use a completely different way of acting in their getting engaged. If you have an interface that you have to teach them, that's what interaction designers always learn. The first thing they do is like, okay, you have to have a mental model of this interface. What's the model? What's the structure? What's the hierarchy? Okay, you have some top-down thing on the left, and you drag that down, and you click something, and you have to press a button to get back there. But if you make it physical, if you have things that people have to move, then they don't have to think about it. And that's often the way we work. We make people use things and touch things. This is, for example, a library we made of just physical pucks. And if you take just physical pucks and replace a library that you can flip through with a physical thing that you can turn, people will explore it. People will take it, they will try it, and they will try to figure out how it works. And that in itself will let them explore more of the possibilities of the experience you're creating. And I think that's all I have time for. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nils. Very interesting. Okay, next we have Bartek. I won't tell you too much, but very interesting, exciting stuff. Has to do with, let's say, big screens and drones.